Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Profit Minds podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen Kirch, creator of the Profit Minds Growth System, a unique blend of profit growth, productivity acceleration, and building robust business process for scale. In every episode, I interview entrepreneurs and small business owners from around the world with a unique story to tell. You can find the show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. Well, hi, everyone. Today, my guest is Lauren Zaslansky-Connor, Fractional COO and founder of Zaz Business Solutions. And today, we're going to talk about how to find hidden profit in your business. Welcome, Lauren.
Thanks, Steve. Nice to be here.
Yeah. So, I start every podcast the same way. How did you get here? Tell us your story.
Thank you. Love the origin story. So for me, right now I work with medium and small businesses, but I started in corporate. So I actually am from New York. I worked in big companies and then I went to business school. And after my MBA, I actually came out to California from New York and I worked at Disney in consumer products. I spent 11 years there in a variety of roles, starting with operational finance and ending in a strategic marketing role. Fun things, great times. And I then went on to sort of smaller and smaller businesses. First leading e-commerce for a large toy company, and then in executive roles at smaller businesses, a chief revenue officer, and then as a founder and COO at my own business. And what I found with the smaller businesses is I really loved helping to develop culture and putting processes together to make decision making easier and developing processes and systems that work with the people, whether the people that were there and helping bring on people to make more money, but also keep more of the money. And when I look at any business, I think about not just the numbers and cents, but really how we all work together. So for me, I really always start in any business with, what is your story? And that story is often is that magic? And then we kind of go into the business metrics after that. But really, I'm taking those metrics and making sense of them is gives me so much joy.
Yeah, that's interesting. So how does the story then inform what about the metrics?
So sometimes, if well, first of all, it gets you to understand what the owner's objectives are, right? So um, whether they want to be a tremendous company or small, or they want to stay at a certain level, right? What's important to them, we want to keep that, right? So
Hmm.
if their business, so I have, a client whose business is, was originally in honor of her mother, right? The company is named after a character of her mother's books. It's not directly related, right? But the story kind of comes from that. Well, we want to make sure we're not stepping on that legacy, right? We want to make sure so it's kind of part of the story. So we're thinking about that as we're planning out the future of the business. Um, so that's kind of just something we're keeping in mind all the time when we're planning. Um, and then storytelling comes into different pieces of it. So how are we growing? That may be what retailers we're going to. It may be, um, how we're talking to customers, right? If the customer connects to the history of the business, right? Um, but this, I tend to look at the data and then I find different ways to tell stories, right? So, how are people buying the product and why are they buying the product? So, I was talking to a founder earlier today, right? And her product, comes from her home country and it comes from a need that she had that connected her to her family. And I said, well, let's dig into that as you're developing your strategy for, marketing your product. And all of a sudden you just saw like these lights go off and it started to energize kind of that conversation. And so that may not necessarily be the profit and loss conversation, but it's energizing the room a little bit
Hmm.
to get to, okay, now let's talk about, how are we making money, right? Because this is what you're doing all day, and this is why you started the business. And so we want to make sure that um, the core of you as a human is being honored in your business.
Yeah, I think that's really important. An awful lot of business owners, and I find this too when I talk to my clients, right, as we're starting down this path, is you got into this business for a reason, and
Hmm.
if you're so busy working in the business and doing the business that you forget to connect to the why,
Right.
um, it it does, it removes the energy.
Yeah.
And if you remove the energy, you're not going to do as good a job.
Right.
And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what the metrics are.
Yeah.
What matters is the energy in the room. I think that's really insightful, Lauren.
Yeah. And I think, you're looking at what you're doing each day. And then obviously the money you're making is like the outside money, right? But whatever you're making outside doesn't make your day to day better, right? So you have to make sure whatever's happening in the room is still true. And right, you could do anything for a paycheck, but why are you there? Um, And I guess, when we sort of flip the storytelling to what are the numbers telling you, right? That's like a different side of things, right?
Hmm.
So that's where I like to look at, what is that profit story, right? What is this? Where did you start? Where are you now? Where is the money coming from? Where is it going? Right. So that is not necessarily the origin story, right? It's the, um, how are you spending your days? How is the money, where's the money going? Where is it coming from? Right. So like if I looked at your checkbook, I would have an idea of kind of how are you spending your days. And we tend to look at those types of things to figure out um, how we can keep more of the money and how we can make more money. And so there's also sort of stories involved in that. And I'm
Yeah.
not a writer, right? I'm not a movie maker. I may live in California, but that's not necessarily what I do. But I think about all of those as helping people connect to numbers, which are scary. You when you start to make sense of those and um, you that helps get to that next level of like, okay, now I understand why they look like that. And now I understand that they're not just like these ugly, numbers on a page. Now I can help grow them better. And
Yeah. Yeah. So what are the things that when you flip that over and you start
Mhm.
looking at the P&L, you start
Yeah.
looking at, here's the revenue coming in and here's the profit coming out. What methodology first? What methodology
Yeah.
do you use to analyze that and say whether it's good or bad or how to improve it?
Yeah. So sometimes I have to go back and like whether it's with a CFO or with their bookkeeper, like reset their P&L on some level. So I tend to say, let's go through, I mean, it's on a very basic level. Let's look at your month to month, what's happening, what's different, right? And let's talk it through. Let's talk through this month, okay, this is what you're making, this is what you're, this is where it's coming from. Um, this is like on a kind of deep dive level because you have to start before you know what's happening, you have to start with like what happened, right? So on just a very basic, let's like it's like looking at it, no judgment. Let's look at what it is. And then next month, look at what it is and what's different, right? And you start to notice things very quick, right? You start to notice um, that all of my um, sorry, I had a little microphone snafu. You start to notice if your revenue is clumping from one retailer, say, or if you have the reports, you might start to notice some unpredictability, say, like, oh, look, this one sold a ton here and this one didn't sell a lot. So that's beyond the P&L, but you start to notice some things, right? Um, when I dig in, I love to say, oh, look, if there's four items and one of them sells a lot in this retailer and another one sells a lot in this retailer, we might not know why, but we start to notice those things, right? It's like a meditation exercise. Like,
Hmm.
I notice this is different. Let's just keep noticing that and we'll sort of see what that means. And we start to notice how those expenses are. So I noticed that every 3 weeks we seem to have more overtime. You might not know why yet, but you start to notice that there's more overtime. So, okay, let's take a look at that. So I find sometimes that those observations are really helpful. And for me, that's kind of the starting point. I also think that that is really valuable to do with multiple people in the room. So it's
Oh,
not
why is that?
necessarily,
Why is that?
well, because you might not notice it by yourself, right? So when I sit there with somebody else and I notice, oh, overtime seems to spike every 3 months, whatever. Someone else might say, oh, yeah, remember every 3 months we do inventory or whatever it is. But like there starts to be conversations about it. And many companies are run very siloed. And I'm not just talking finance and marketing. I'm even talking marketing and marketing, right? And so they think about like how this spend is influencing this tiny little thing. But when you start to have conversations, you realize the impacts of different things. And so of that, so like the start, those conversations start to bring things to the front. I'm not saying spend 27 hours on it, but thinking about those, it's not just the accounting team is looking at the numbers. It's like, come together. What do we got here? Right? What are we noticing?
Yeah,
Um,
because the accounting team isn't going to know the story behind the marketing
right,
activities.
right. And you may not know why something's happening, right? And sometimes it's a weird thing. Like, oh, okay, we noticed that happened. Well, that was the day of the snowstorm. Hmm, right? Like, or sales went up because nobody had school that day. Right. Right. I mean, I worked in toys, so that's often my references, right? But, but it could be, Dodgers are in the World Series and therefore, like, we sold a lot of whatever, or we sold less of something. And you may not connect the dots. Well, you may not connect the dots 2 years from now, but you also might not connect the dots right away. But when you start to see patterns, that's when you start to overlay like reality, right? And it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
always like in your numbers. It's just like other things happening.
So what's the, I hesitate to ask this, but what's the biggest mistake that you see that the business owner makes in that you're able to pull out from those numbers, that they're just overlooking something, or is there a pattern?
So two things are patterns that I see a lot. One is too many, whether that's items or service, too many options, right? So people go into business that are creative, right? They're creative, they're scientists, they have some real thing that they love to do, and that's what they're doing. So then they have lots of them, right? They always have a new idea. I've left a client meeting going, I'm walking out the door. Please do not develop a new product while I leave the room. I'll be back tomorrow, please. And literally have been met with, sorry, I got another one. I'm like, no.
No.
And so, and it's not that I don't think you have great ideas. It's that there's only so much marketing money to go around, time to go around, operations to go around. And so each item requires attention and love and time and money, right? And so you have to pick and choose your favorites, right? And so as a business owner, you don't want to have a favorite child, so you're trying to spread it around. So I see that a lot. So one of the biggest things that I've done with clients is if you start to pare that down, very quickly we see an increase. And you would expect an increase in profit, but I've seen an increase in revenue.
Hmm.
And one recent client, I'm talking increase in revenue of 3, 4 times, right? And part of that is instead of spending the marketing money on these products that are, I'm going to say dead weights. And again, maybe they'd be great in 4 years, but they're not great now.
Or maybe they'd be great if you focused on them instead of the other one,
Right,
right? I mean, you pick
right.
one.
Let's pick one. Right, exactly. Now, there's strategic reasons to keep other products, but that's part of that discussion, right? So that's a big thing. At Disney, we'd always say SKU rationalization, right? Expand a little. The other thing that I see and I focus a lot on is, and I mentioned to you, like managing agencies. And it's this idea that, we have the branding agency over here. We have this guy who manages Amazon. We have an e-commerce, like for our direct to consumer business over here. On our here, we have our retail sales team that goes over here. Um, we have our Google ad guy who like we don't. So there's a few things that happen there. One is those people don't talk to each other, right?
Yep.
And two, they well, they don't talk to each other. Well, I guess there's more than two things. They don't talk to each other. They're often not given the tools to succeed, partly because they're not talking to each other. And so the tools to succeed, like they don't have all the information, they don't have all the data, they don't have like imagine if you do a really good ad for Google, wouldn't that be helpful to use in Amazon? But they're not talking to each other. So
You might think so. Yeah.
right. Like maybe not. Um, and they're not managed, right? So if you have an employee who's like, in Australia and they're doing their thing, and then you're like, you don't know how to manage them because you don't are not used to managing people and you have too many people. So you're just like, they just do their thing, right?
And they're being
So
successful. So why do I have to manage them?
right. And you don't know what that looks like because you don't know what successful looks like. So you're just like, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
And then what happens is they get dumped and then a new person comes on. So I hear a lot of, oh my God, SEO doesn't work. I keep hiring people and firing them. They never work. And like, how long did you last? 2 weeks, 2 months, right? They hire them, they don't work. They hire them, they don't- like, so
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
big
Okay.
red flag.
So giving programs not the right amount of time to succeed, giving products and or segments the right attention so they succeed. I'm sensing a pattern here,
Yeah,
right?
yes. There's a amount of time and the amount of energy, right?
Hmm.
Um, and there's also a bit of like sitting and sharing the data there, right? So you don't necessarily, there's not necessarily one right answer to why something is
No.
best, right? But
Yeah.
I always go back, the correlation between, an ad campaign in one retailer and sales in another, or an ad campaign, in one area, in one thing. And back in the day, you couldn't measure any of this. So now we feel like, oh, we can measure it. So it
Yep.
must be this. Like that email was sent to four people or 4,000 people and only one person made a sale. Therefore, it's not working. You're like, okay, but maybe they went to the Google store and they bought a bunch of the apps. Like maybe they didn't actually click on this and they did something else. So you have to really, like, this is where you sort of
Yeah.
overlay
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
data
Yeah.
piece.
No, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So,
I know you
so,
get it.
and I know you're very data centric. So,
Mhm.
talk to us a little bit about how you approach, a business owner who is not necessarily a numbers person.
Yeah.
How do you approach them and help them sift through the data and make sense of it? Just beyond
Yeah.
spreadsheets and we'll call them vanity metrics, right? So
Right. Right. Well, so I think so part of that, I mean, when I started about storytelling, and I think I went a little
that's
off
all
the
right. I
rails a
didn't
bit,
bring you
right?
back either. But
So yeah, but I mean, but I think it's related to that. It's like, how do you know? Okay, let's take a look and say, if we focused, you have to go through the data, but then it's pictures and stories, right? So it's let's talk about we're selling this many products. Let's take a look. Okay. If we remove this product, you will have this much more money. If we put this product back in, you will have less money, right? Like some of that stuff has to be explained and in a way that starts to gel a little bit. But it's also, I have to go in there and gain their trust, right? Which is part of why I have to understand why they're in it for what reasons they're in, why they're there, right?
sure.
Um, if I come in and start focusing on, and you may have heard me complain about acronyms before. If I come in complaining about, um, you know, I don't, it's a big issue for me when whatever it is, whoever comes in and talks in their language of banking and marketing metrics and these vanity metrics of using words that uh, entrepreneurs don't understand. Um, the business owner often doesn't feel heard, right? And if you don't feel heard, you don't feel trusted, and you feel stupid. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It just means you're being talked to in a different language. So part of coming in, is not coming in with my MBA speak, is coming in with as much as I can. And I'm not perfect at this, right? But talking to them like a human and trying to make sense of it. What I also do is I model this asking with my with the agencies when I'm on the call with a banker, when I'm on the call with someone. I'm modeling this. Could you explain what that means over and over and over again? I was a teaching assistant at Columbia Business School um, for first year students. And, part of it, I said, well, yeah, I'm really good at a spreadsheet, but the real magic isn't being good at a spreadsheet. It's being able to explain it to people who have no experience there. And that's that's the hard part, right? It's like, so you go into a meeting and someone's really smart, but if you don't understand them, it doesn't matter. So really listening to them and understanding, you know, math isn't, it's not just that it's hard. There's also a lot of emotion tied to like, I'm not a math person, and my mom always said, don't forget it. And I don't know, I do math like a girl. Like there's so much emotion tied to some of that stuff. Like that you have to like get in there. It's not just as simple as like this is a skill I don't know. No, there's a lot there. So sometimes, going through the that data and saying, let's like write this like it, in English and talk about it like in English. We want to make more money. And what does that mean? Okay, 1,000 people saw the ad and 50 people clicked on it and 4 people bought it. Is that a good number? Is that a bad number? Like, I don't want to hear this ROAS, blah, 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 talk to me like this is real people. And that is that. And I model that over and over and over. And sometimes people think like, oh my God, she doesn't get it. It's like, no, it has to make sense because if you keep pushing it, you start to really understand that there's real people making these decisions on the other end too.
So, we promise people talk about hidden profits.
Hmm.
So where do you find those? What does that mean to find a hidden profit in a
Yeah.
business?
So some of it is, there's these costs that get lost, and I mentioned the SKU rationalization. This is a big piece of it where there is money um, that gets sort of sucked away for some of it is, I'm gonna say, cost of goods, right? And I focus a lot on consumer products because that's sort of, it's very easy to imagine the cost of a good of a product, right? It's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
all I
sure.
do, but it's very
Yeah.
easy to sort of say it's a thing, we're making it, this is what it cost it, right? So when you make two products, right, you think about like, oh, I have twice as much cost. But if you only have one slot on the shelf, right, you only get one of that time. So you can sort of imagine two cost, one slot. But what you often don't think about is the amount of brain power that's going into making those two, right? First, because you're thinking about like balancing that and you're there's so much work that's going into multiple parts of that are not included in that cost of good. And so I see a lot of these little pieces that are not captured in the numbers even, right? They're the management's time in developing a line. They're conversations with factories on products that may never make it to shelf, right? There's partnership conversations and pricing conversations, right? So not everything we make gets to shelf. We know that, right? But it's so many little pieces that if you can focus on the few, like you don't need to make 12 that are kind of similar. Um, and then it's also like at every level. So when you go to talk to a retail buyer, if they're only going to take 3, you don't need to offer them 37. Right? So I like to, in e-commerce, I say you want to chaperone your customer. Like you take them by their hand and you walk them to your store and you say, you should buy this. And if you like this, you should buy this. The easier you can do that, right? The less they're like drifting off and like walking into the woods, the better. So the hidden profit is like, there's money in those places, and if you lose them, right, they're gone, right? They're not um they're not. I mean, I guess it's also like the hidden costs of all of those little things. There's money to be made if you focus on the right in the right places.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is it's not, I mean, yes, you can measure the gross profit of a
Hmm.
product, but if you have too many of those products, even if they all have the same gross
Hmm.
product,
Hmm.
gross profit, right? The fact that you have so many of them means that you spend time and energy and marketing dollars and all that kind of stuff
Hmm.
spread across all of them. Whereas
Yep.
if you focused on just a couple, then the the total profitability of the company would go up
Right.
because you would have less on this sort of waste, if you will, on these other things.
Right. And it's like at every little stage. So, if you
Hmm.
have a warehouse, right, and you have three piles that are, this high versus, 16 piles that are short, right? Or you think every single slot, even if you're getting charged, whatever it is, right? You're just thinking about taking up that room. And from an operations standpoint, it's like sort of, you're pooling as much as you can pool, you are going to save, you're going to get to the front of the line quicker, and you're going to be able to sell through quicker, and you're not going to have as much stale product as quicker, right? Like all of that works a
Okay.
little bit
Yeah,
faster.
yeah, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's,
So if somebody's listening here
yeah,
and they want to have an
I
action
hope
that they could
somebody is.
take this week,
Hmm.
right, that would make their company easier to run or easier to sell, what's one thing that they could do, one concrete thing they could do this week?
Yeah. So I would say get a few people in the room and just talk about their metrics. That sounds so, whatever that is. So you have sales metrics and you have marketing metrics and you have a finance person. It just doesn't have to be high level people, but just have a few people in the room and sit down and say, like, what are we seeing? Um, you know, and if you don't have weekly, then look at the past month and say, let's dig in, let's just dig in. What are we seeing? Without judgment, right? Because it's so tempting to start to blame.
Yeah.
So tempting. And we don't, and the problem when you're blaming is you're not solving, right? You're blaming. And as I know, I have two kids and everyone's blaming everyone all the time, right? So it's just like take a look at what we have and try to say, like, what do we have? What are we seeing? Right? Um, and you may find something that's just like, um, just blows your mind, right? Um, and I think, and I also, I'm a big caveater, and that drives people crazy, right? When you look at data, it's this happened, and because of this, blah, blah, blah. But just looking at what you have in a room of people that are like have diverse perspectives, invite the people with the other perspectives in the room and see what they think, right?
Please.
And
Yes.
like
Yeah.
shocking what y'all
Yeah.
hear.
Yeah. Now, do you recommend doing that just with a single month or week of data, or do you like to compare two or three or four over time over
I
time?
Yeah, I'm notorious. I go back to the beginning of time a lot, much to sometimes people's chagrin. So I would say, I mean, it really depends on the business, right? But
Sure.
I say, well, let's say I say to somebody, an agency that I work with often, every single bi-weekly meeting, I say, don't give me a number in a vacuum. That's like saying it's four. I don't know what that means. It doesn't help me. And literally, I think I say this in every meeting because I don't care. I don't care what your month to date ROAS is without whatever. So I think perspective is really important. Now, you have to know why you're looking at. So yeah, I think it's a you can't look at it by yourself. So yes, you start to build it. And if it's weekly, it's monthly, it might even be annual. I mean, you don't, right? It could be daily. It really depends what you're doing. Um, and there'll be some patterns, right? I mean, in toys, we would talk about seasonality, right?
Of
But in
course.
many things, it's weekly, right? Around this time of year, it's like the Monday, it jumps up on a Monday and it goes down, right? So, you know, there's so many factors, right? When you're dealing with an online app, right? there's things that are internal and there's things that are external, and you're not going to know all of them, but you start to see some things that are a little weird, and you're like, okay, this is making sense. So if you have a company that's moving really fast, have that quick meeting every day, and who knows, the person in the warehouse might be like, oh yeah, that week we used a weird box and like we're getting more returns that week. Like you may not know what's popping in. And um, I think it's really important to start using those metrics to like learn, right? And so first you learn, right? Eventually you start doing things about it, and eventually you start predicting, but you can't get there at the beginning.
Right.
You got to start looking at them.
Yeah. So I understand you have a special offer for the folks that have lasted this long through our conversation.
Do, yes. So I have a hidden profit power hour, which is actually a two meeting, and I'm bringing it up over here, so I have it in front of me here. Hidden profit power hour, which is basically a working session. We're going to do a pre-meeting here, and then basically a working session. So one of the challenges I see with business owners, kind of at all stages, but I'm going to say between about 1 and 20 million, but I imagine it goes up forever, is this, oh my gosh, I need your help. And it's to me, but I'm sure it's to everyone, right? I need your help. And yet let me clean up first, and then I'll get to you, right?
Yeah.
I had somebody say to me today, and she made this face, and it was like, I said, I know the face. And so what I want to do is help you get to like, let's figure out what it is. So this is designed for like, let's figure out what that problem is, and we're going to work on that one problem together. And it doesn't have to be one problem, but we're going to dig in. We're going to dig in. So that first half hour, we're going to try to figure out what we're going to need to look at. And then the second meeting, you're going to bring a report, whether that's going to be a P&L, a sales by distribution, or an org chart, whatever that is, we're going to dig in together. So the hidden profit power hour is for either family-run, multi-generational product manufacturers, founder-led consumer brands, mission-driven organizations, or anyone else who maybe listened to, we can work with. The introductory offer is $95. So typically this is about $150, and we're going to offer it to listeners of the Profit Minds podcast. So
Great.
there's a link actually, which we're going to include
We'll put
in
in
the
the show
notes.
notes.
Yeah,
Yep.
but it's zazbusinesssolutions.com/profit-power.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Best way is going to be LinkedIn. You'll find me. I'm pretty active there, and that's Lauren Zaslansky, which is ZASLANSKY, Connor, CONNER. That's the trick. And I'm on LinkedIn and Zaz Business Solutions if you want to find me as well.
Great.
Thanks, Stephen.
And that concludes our show. Thanks so much to my guest, Lauren Zaslansky-Connor, fractional COO and founder of Zaz Business Solutions. I hope you learned something about how to find hidden profit in your business. I know I did. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Profit Minds podcast. This is your host, Dr. Stephen Kirch. Please visit www.profitminds.net for other episodes or to contact me. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others. Thanks for listening. Have a grateful day.